Oh boy.
Welcome to the Oh Boy Show. I'm your host Olaf, and today I want to talk with you guys a little bit about something I actually really know something about for sure. I studied applied psychology, and I'm specialized in positive psychology, also called the psychology of well-being. And I want to talk a little bit about happiness today, because it's such a term in our society that everybody kind of has to live up to. Or because if you say that you don't want to be happy, you seem like this weird person, like why don't you want to be happy? Happiness is like the ultimate good thing. And we don't really think enough about what it is happiness and what makes us actually happy. What is the difference between some of the different things that we call happiness? For instance, like pleasure or enjoyment. We often, confuse these terms with each other, and they're definitely used for different reasons to a certain extent. Let's like give an example of pleasure. Pleasure is mostly seen as short-term happiness. Things like buying a new clothes, eating a really good snack like a big fat hamburger, or a bar of chocolate or something. There can be a lot of pleasure in that. That's the way that often pleasure is used, as far as I know. That's seen as pleasure, especially in also old philosophy. I've read some things about it. That is pleasure often used in this term. Joy is more used in a way of like internal happiness or internal joy. So something that you really value from the inside. Like things like I love basketball. I really enjoy basketball. Not everybody enjoys basketball, but I really enjoy it. You know what I mean? So that's a certain internal happiness that you have in yourself that you can create by doing something in the external world. And then we have happiness. Now, happiness is something that often is described as something that is quite not influenceable. One of the things that often is said is that you can't really go directly towards happiness. Happiness is just something that is thrown together from different things, and certainly on a certain moment you are happy because of different situations, and you can't really aim towards happiness. Like one of the things that often is said is that if you aim towards happiness, you will definitely be unhappy. Now, is that true? I think to a certain extent it is, but I think that's why we should aim for well-being and feeling well, being well, mentally and physically, feeling well, especially. Because this, in my experience and in my knowledge, this increases the amount of moments that you enjoy, and therefore also often that you feel happy. And that has to do with the fact that if you feel good, you're more likely to at a certain point feel happy and stuff like that. So that's kind of the way I would describe happy is just like kind of an ultimate good feeling. Like if you feel well, it's kind of like like it's good, it's good, it's not great. Happiness is feeling great, but good is just all overall feeling well. Now what do we know about that? What do we know about happiness in general? What do we know about feeling well? Now, one of the things that's very interesting to me always is that there are researches done, and I've named this a lot of times, is that if you earn more than $70,000 in the US, your happiness level doesn't increase anymore based on the amount of earnings you have. Now, that's a lot of money, you know what I mean? Now, what I question often is that, what does that mean, because it's an average. There are a lot of people who have in that research, not everybody uses that money to the right things, but it's an average. So let's kind of say, what would you buy of 70,000 euros? What some essential things? Well, I think that to a certain extent, this gives you, clothing, a house, health insurance, economical freedom or safety. I think safety was a better word, and it gives you the capability of having some autonomy in your life. You don't live from paycheck to paycheck. You can make choices. You can negotiate with people because you have money. You're a little bit more free from economy and other people because you have some earnings. So these things actually really affect your well-being on a physical level. So if you live paycheck to paycheck, your stress level will be higher, you will have less autonomy about your life, and that will decrease the well-being that you experience or that you are physically, and therefore the chance of being happy is automatically, less. Doesn't mean that you don't have to be, but there are a lot of things that can influence it. So there's done an experiment once, and there was a result. I'm not so sure about the numbers right now. I think for 40% of your happiness is done by external factors, 10% is done by social influence, and 50% is in your own hands. Something like that. I think 50% was in your own hands, and the other things were done by external things. Now, for instance, your nature. 40% was nature, 10% was the social influence, and 50% was your own influence. So, to a certain extent, you do not influence completely if you're happy, yes or no. Definitely your genes have a factor in that. Now, if you're already a person that isn't that happy, generally from themselves, naturally speaking, that means that there's the 40%, and then in the 10% social influence, maybe you don't have the good people around you, maybe your situation isn't that good. And then next to that, you have a job with a low income, with that you can't pay for health insurance, so your security is less, your safety feels less. So the probability of you actually, feeling happy a lot of the times is not that high. So that's very much a way, I believe, to look at it. So what do you do in such a situation? Now, I think that to a certain extent you can influence certain things, especially when you already earn more. And that's really one of the problems here, is that if you live in a Western country, you have more options. Or not, I don't even say Western country, but if you just have more money. Like, so the further you get to the $70,000 a month or a year, Jesus. The more options you do, because you have more autonomy about your life, so the more things you can start doing. You can start using your talents more in your work. You can start looking for different work. You can start working in things you like more. So therefore, you even have more probability of becoming more happy. But after that, it doesn't really matter how much more you earn. So there's certainly like a peak there. And I think that a lot of people should look at their lives a little bit more in that sense of like, if you earn that type of money. And I think that in a lot of Western countries, because this is a study done in the US, but I think you can generalize it to a certain extent to other countries. The amount of money isn't the same in every country. Certain countries get health insurance, from their government, like the Netherlands here. Certain countries don't, so there's also a difference in that. How expensive the country is and everything, you have to kind of calculate in. But if you earn around, let's say, 70,000, 50,000 euros or dollars a year, you should probably, be able to be happy. Now, that's a hard thing to say, because if you're not, then you're like, fuck you, Olaf. Like, that's a horrible thing to say. You have to see it as a skill, because your own well-being and the only way you are feeling well is a skill. Taking care of yourself, being well, it's a skill. It's based on knowledge and the way you portray yourself. Now, that is trainable. You can train that. You can't train yourself to be happy, but you can train yourself to feel well and be well. Now, of course, the first thing that comes up in that idea is that, being fit, doing exercises, eating healthy. That I think that these sleeping enough, 7 to 8 hours a night, might sound insanely a lot for some people, but that's what the research says is healthy. So I think that in these cases there's a lot of misunderstanding about happiness, and a lot of people choose for pleasure, and that means that also low income people choose for pleasure sometimes, because it's really shitty to not feel well. So instead of going for the long run game, you spend your money on pleasure, new clothes, new things, and then you don't grow in the hierarchy, let's say, of happiness, and you don't get the autonomy at some point. You don't get the financial freedom, because you don't have to have that $70,000 a year. It's just a marker for things that you need, So you can also establish economic safety by sparing up money, by investing money, by increasing the amount of money you earn in other expenses, by increasing your skills in other factors. There are a lot of things you can do. Now, this sounds still like as if we're aiming for happiness. No, again, we're not aiming for happiness here. We're aiming for well-being, feeling well. So that has a lot to do with also internal factors, meaning the things like how do you use your character. So I gave a couple of masterclasses a while ago about resilience, and one of the things that helps people a lot is to know what their character is like. There's a free character test you can do on the University of Pennsylvania website. You can just Google positive character test, University of Pennsylvania. So if you Google that, there will be an English test you can do for free. And you can also do a Dutch one if you're Dutch, character strength test. Some of them you have to look for the right one from the University of Pennsylvania, because there are some of them that cost money, but this one is for free because it's used for research purposes. And they're a big sponsor of the military, so they have a lot of money. That's pretty nice. That's how good the research of well-being is. It reduces depression, reduces PTSS in what is PTSD in English? I don't know. But in military people experiences, also in other people, of course, So there are a lot of benefits from acting these things out. So what the character test gives you is it gives you a rating of 24 different character strengths that people have, and are universally culturally accepted around the world in most countries. That has been researched, and you can use your top 5 strengths. That means that those are your main strengths to go to. So if there's something lower on the list, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't do it. It means that you would rather choose a higher one. So for instance, one of my highest is creativity. One of my lower ones is teamwork. Now, I can work in teams, but whenever it comes to me being creative and working with a team, I would, if the team makes me choose to being creative and working with them, I will rather choose creative, and I will probably step out of the team. What has happened in my past a lot. So these are things to know about, but it means the top 5, you should try and use your top 5 more in your life, because it's generally what your character's like and what you love doing. If you can implement that in your work more, you will enjoy your work more. So now we're talking about joy, and what joy often does is that it increases the amount of positive emotions you experience, and that increases the amount of well-being that you have. It's very interesting. So to get a little bit deeper into that, there is a PERMA model. Some people call it the model of happiness. I would call it the model of well-being, mental well-being. And it stands for positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishments. And it's the idea that these 5 factors determine how well you feel, literally. So you need people around you, you need meaning in your life, you need to accomplish things, you need to have positive emotion in your life, you need to be engaged in your life, experience a certain amount of flow in your life in the things that you do. Now you can increase the amount of flow you experience also by using more of your character strengths in the things that you do. So that's a very beneficial thing to do. But I definitely recommend people, because it increases the amount of positive emotion you feel. It increases the amount of engagement you feel in your work. So that's very important. And then you have relationships. So it's important to have people around you that can support you, that increase your well-being. Then there's meaning in life. What's also a very important thing to do. Now, I think that for a lot of people who have low income, the meaning of their life is often their family. And I think that's very great. I think you should use that for your advantage as much as you can, because having something to work for and having a meaning in your life and focusing on that can give you a lot of, again, positive emotions. It can give you a purpose. This can increase your well-being, and it can make life easier for you. Now this is more difficult if you're more pessimistic. What brings me to the next point, and that's learned optimism. Optimism has been proved to also be one of the ways that you can increase your own well-being. Now, to my surprise, a lot of people would say that, this is not to my surprise, but a lot of people would say that optimism is unrealistic often. It can be unrealistic. But out of research, it seems that optimists are often more realistic than pessimists. What is quite a weird thing to realize. So there's somehow being optimistic is almost like, in some cases, like a self-fulfilling prophecy for some people, and it kind of determines on how you interpret certain things, and especially negative things, and how you interpret them. So, for instance, if you interpret a negative situation to yourself internally, so you're like, your job's not going well, and you're like, fuck, that's my fault, I'm an idiot, and you say like, everything in my life is like this and it will never change. So that means it's internal, it's stable, and it's globally, so in your whole life. Now, if you interpret negative situations like that, it will decrease your well-being, and it will decrease the amount of positive emotions you feel, how engaged you are with your life. You will start, rendering on about things more, and this is being a pessimist, in the way that Martin Seligman has done his research about optimism and pessimism. And the same thing you can do the opposite around. That means interpreting it in an external way. So being like, it's not my fault. Things are just this way. It can change, and it's not everything in my life. Not everything is negative, and not everything is this way. That's an optimistic way, and you can learn this. You can actively learn to do this. It's super interesting. Learned optimism. Martin Seligman wrote a book about this. There are also videos online about it. I think it's really worth to look a little bit more up about it if you want to increase your amount of optimism in your life, and how to be more optimistic. So now we talked a little bit about like already earning money financially, and how that affects your amount of happiness, or well-being, let's say, and to a certain extent also happiness. We talked about your character and how you can use your character more in life to improve your own well-being, and we talked a little bit about optimism versus pessimism. Now, one of the things that I believe that people do too little is stand still for a moment and realize what the things are that would have the most impact in their lives. This is a little bit done with the 20-80 principle. For the people who don't know, the 20-80 principle, I believe it's actually the 80-20 principle. I always call it the other way around. But it's the idea that 80% of the results are caused by 20% of the effort. And the idea is that if you would go study for an exam, you would study, let's say, if you would put 20% of the effort, you get an 8. If you put 100% of the effort, you get a 10. Because getting a 10 is about 5 times as hard as getting an 8. Now, this seems to be pretty true overall, in a lot of situations, in most situations. So this is the same thing for well-being, So a question you can ask yourself, because now it seems like, oh shit, this is a lot of fucking things, Olaf. Like, I can't do this. I don't have fucking time for this. I have to work 40 hours a week. I have a family. I have to do this, blah, 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 blah. And I get that, I think that's completely true. I think that you cannot do everything right now and change your whole life. And, I'm this well-being person. I'm happy. Blah, blah. No. So an easier way out seems to be, pleasure in buying things. And, in this way, in the long term, you don't really improve the situation. So what do you do? Now, I think that one of the best things to do is look at your life and just be like, what 20% of effort would cost 80% of the results, in terms of well-being? What could, improve my well-being the most? So that means that if you don't follow a very good diet, change your diet. If you don't do any exercises, start doing exercises, Like, these things are the most basic things. If you really do not like your job, try to use the character strength test to kind of use your character strengths more in your job, because that could be, if you don't really have a choice of changing jobs, of course. But I'm thinking that most people who have the financial freedom to actually do that, will do that. That's what I think. But it doesn't have to be for everybody. But using the character strength in case you don't like your job, really hate it, and that's like maybe causing most of your unhappiness or most of your unwell-being, if that's a word. Um, yeah, so I think that is really one of the best things you can do. Look at your life, what 20% of effort you can put in to get 80% of the result of well-being, better well-being. And the answer is in most cases not earning more money. It's being either smarter with your money, because that's also a very underrated thing. So what we talked about a little bit is about the money thing of 70k US dollars a year. What I believe to be true is that a lot of that money is always already wasted. You don't need that much money to get the maximum out of it. It's really a lot about how smart you are with your money and how you handle it. Now, I think that it's a very important thing to really think about what do you need. Now, I use for this often the pyramid of Maslow. It's the pyramid of human needs and how that motivates us. Now, I think that one of the things is very much physical health, sleep, and your diet, exercising. That's very much in the lowest level, in the basic level. So those things are most essential. Then a little bit higher than that is financial freedom or safety, for you and your family. Now, so that's a high level higher. Now, so again, being physically healthy in sleeping, fixing your sleeping, fixing your food and your diet and your sporting habits, is the most important thing to do. If you already have that, then the next level becomes more important. Then that's the 20% of effort that will cost 80% of the result. So that means that fixing your finances, fixing the way that you invest money, fixing these things, like these are going to influence you probably the most and increase your well-being. And the next level is social circles, improving your relationships, So if you already have, let's say, financial safety, you take care of yourself physically, you sleep well, you do all these things, but you're still not feeling well, you're still maybe not a lot of times happy, then maybe you should try and invest more time and effort into friendships and improve your relationships and read books about how to do that and how to be better with people. Because this will be the next level, of improvement for you. The level after that has to do with self-respect and gaining respect. I believe that this will go more automatically. Like the more you will focus on this and these things, the more respect you will gain for yourself, And I think also this has to do to a certain extent with your own norms and values and following your own norms and values. But you need good friendships and you need good financial safety and you need good physical well-being to be able to follow norms and values to your own extent, and then you will respect yourself more, because you will see yourself more as a good person, and that's respectable, So that's the next level that you should try and improve up on. And then after that you have what do you call it in English? Well, it basically is your potential, reaching your maximum potential. Well, I mean, later on, Maslow changed the pyramid to add other things added. Maybe these things are important. I think that to this extent, this is just a basic outline. Again, this is 20% of the effort I'm putting in right now for I get 80% of the results. So generally speaking, this is true. This can really work for everybody. Following these principles, using saying that. If you don't sleep well, if you don't feel well and you have the basic needs, you don't fulfill one of them, pick one of them that will probably influence you most, and that would, be the most easy one to do and would cause most of the result. That's really what you would look at. And it's kind of a guess and test it out for yourself. You know what I mean? Find a way to do these things. Maybe you cannot sleep 8 hours a night. So maybe you have to sleep 6 and do a 1.5 hour nap in the end of the day, because maybe you work night shifts or whatever. There are different opportunities. You have to be creative about it. You cannot take the information too literal. You really have to think about it yourself to a certain extent. I'm just trying to outline here some of the things I've done in my life that really worked for me and that I really believe that other people can benefit from. Water is also one of the basic needs. I'm not so sure. I think most people drink enough water, but I'm not so sure about that. But this is really the basic outlining, as far as I know, of how to feel well mentally, and partially also physically, because of the diet thing, and because feeling physically well is, I believe, the start to feeling mentally well. So exercising, diet, sleeping. These are physically things you should do, and that will also have an impact mentally. And the higher you go in the hierarchy of needs from Maslow, the more you will increase your well-being, and therefore you will increase the amount of probability that you will often feel happy as well, especially if you start focusing on each level slowly, small steps. I'm 100% sure that this will really, really improve their lives if you do this. And it's really a little bit to think about being more critical towards the society itself. In an extent of maybe, happiness isn't the most important thing in the world. Maybe it's your own well-being and feeling well. And maybe then happiness will come from itself, if you just follow that internal line of trying to feel well, and just being okay with that. Life is not about having an extreme feeling of happiness all the fucking time. Nobody's experiencing that. I think that social media can cause you the feeling that people are having that. It's not, nobody's experiencing a constant feeling of happiness. Happiness also kind of is this idea that if once you've experienced a peak, there will always be a down. You know what I mean? If you've been extremely happy for a while, if you've been on vacation, for instance, you're back home, and then at first you're like, I'm home, and then after a while you have to work again, and you're a little bit because you've been enjoying and everything so much for a while. I think the trick is more of improving your everyday joy in the everyday things you do. And if you do that, then you will increase your well-being, and by increasing your well-being, you will, again, it will be a positive circle, because you'll increase the amount of joy, and by doing those things, you in the end will increase the amount of happiness that you will experience. Now, this is, I think, a very, very important thing to realize, that you can step into a positive circle of feeling well and feeling better by slowly, upping your pyramid. And I'm talking here not just about a monthly process. I'm talking here about a yearly process, of stepping a little bit up every single time, and being quite critical about that. I mean, there's always something to improve, and some of the things that are always a little bit better, and you just have to be critical about what you could improve in yourself and about your situation in a certain moment. You know what I mean? You cannot just take this information and be use it too literal. Yeah, because I'm trying to give advice based on the science of well-being that I know. I've tested out myself. You have to be critical about your own situation and take out of this what is probably most useful for you. And that's something where it starts, I believe, when it comes to well-being and happiness, is self-reflection. Being able to look critically at yourself, and being able to accept the fact that if you're not happy, that it might be you that's the problem, to a certain extent. Because it's never fully your problem or never fully your fault, but it is to a certain extent. And that's very a good way to look at it. Your own happiness, your own well-being, your own enjoyment in life is in your own hands. And if you look at other people and the world around you, and you blame them for your situation, and you're going to act hopelessly about it, it's not going to change. And that's a fact. And although it might sound very harsh and it's very shitty, it is a true thing. And I think that realizing that, and realizing the fact that you have influence over this and you can improve it, and trust me, you really, really can, by taking small steps and starting at the bottom, and just improving a little bit every day, or every week, if you don't have the time to do it every day, then that's fine. and then it's okay. And just taking that little bit of responsibility and accepting the fact that there's nobody going to help you and there's nobody that's going to fix it. That's just, the harsh reality of the reality and the world around you. I wish it was different. I wish everybody, could be happy and could be well, and everybody would be helping each other to achieve that. Realistically, everybody has their own problems. Everybody's dealing with their own problems. And everybody is too busy with their own to realize that other people need some help. So take a little bit of responsibility. Try to improve your life by starting at the bottom, or wherever you think what 20% can improve 80% of your well-being, and through that process, improve your life. Well, I hope you enjoyed the show for today. It was something that I actually knew something about, and I'm not just interested in to think about it. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good day.